Hi, folks. Welcome back. Here we are with our next recorded lecture, this Philosophy 110, Introduction to Philosophy. And I am your instructor, Victor Fabian Abundas Guerra. Today, we're going to be talking about Charles Mill's article, Non-Cartesian Sums. Non-Cartesian Sums. With that said, let's go ahead and start up these slides. So we'll have a little outline. We'll do a recap of Descartes and his skepticism. At the end of the last slides, we did a little thinking exercise regarding a transplant scenario where you were in a horrible car accident. We're going to go ahead and revisit that one. And we're going to go ahead and get into Charles Mill's non-Cartesian sums. As we're going to see, it's going to be still going to be dealing in the tradition of epistemology, what we can know, but it's going to be dealing with it a little differently from Descartes. In fact, it's going to be a criticism of Descartes coming from a particularly black experience, because Charles Mill is a black philosopher. In particular, as we're going to see, he's going to argue against the Cartesian sum and in favor of something he calls the Ellisonian sum, as well as bringing in the idea of a sub-person. We're probably not going to get all of that today. We'll finish it on the next recorded lecture. So with that said, from Descartes' Meditations, right, Meditations 1 and 2, we can go ahead and formalize the dreamer argument if we really wanted to, right? Premise 1, I must discard and believe that I can doubt. That is Cartesian skepticism. If you can even doubt it a little bit, you gotta throw it away. Premise 2, there's lucid dreams. The premise 3, there's no surefire 100% way to tell that you're not actually dreaming right now. Number 4, you believe an external reality exists, but that belief is given to you by your senses. And number 5, you cannot know without doubt if that external reality you perceive is part of a dream. So therefore, you have to discard your belief in an external reality. You don't know whether existence, this external world, actually exists. You can't trust anything your senses tell you. Furthermore, with the evil demon argument, right, you can't know anything regarding inference or logic. The only thing you can know, right, and this is what he gets to in the second meditation, is cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. No matter how much you doubt, you're still something that's doubting, you're still something that's thinking. Remember, according to Descartes, you are a mind, a thinking thing that just so happens to have a body. Your body is not really important to who you are at all. And again, I gave you that car crash example from last time. Let's go ahead and continue with that one. Let's go ahead and modify that car crash example so we can see where Charles Mills is going to sort of fit in here with his lived black experience and his views on epistemology. So you were involved in a horrible car collision, just like last time. And via a new scientific procedure, however, doctors were able to transmit your consciousness and memories into a new empty body. The body, however, is of a different race. Now, maybe you yourself don't believe in races. What general people will believe is a different race. So if people will call you Hispanic or mestizo, right, mixed race, you are now in a white body or an Asian body or a black body. If you are what people will call white, of the white race, you are now in a Native American body. So on and so on, right? After a day, you awaken in your new body, which is of a different race. And we can even push the analogy even further, right? Or the hypothetical even further. Let's say that you're also born into a different gender, a different sex. So suppose that, you as maybe a white man get a new body of a black woman. The question that we would ask now at this point, right, is do you still consider yourself to be you? Why or why not? Now, if we ask this to Descartes, right, he would say, surprisingly, that you could be born into a different sex in a different race, but you are still you because your body is not relevant to your identity at all. But the question that I want to ask you folks, right, and we're going to see what Charles Mills is going to answer differently. Do you think that? Do you agree with that? If you were born in a body or woke up in the body of a completely different race, completely different gender, would you still be you? Or is your race, your embodied experience, part of your identity in a meaningful, integral way? Now, suppose in addition To having a new body, you also now unfortunately lose much of your memory. The doctors were overly optimistic regarding the procedure. The same question, do you still consider yourself to be you? Why or why not? At this point, both Charles Mills, as we're going to see, as well as Descartes would say, no, you've changed already. But notice that for question 1, Charles Mills, as we're going to see in a moment, would already say that you are a different person. So let's get into Charles Mills. And now that we've sort of had a little sci-fi science fiction fun here, right? So he starts off his article by saying, look, traditionally, philosophers love talking quite abstractly, and they love using all these hypothetical scenarios. And we do, right? We've seen many of these in this class so far. But we often, according to him, speak of a universal and generic person and their rights without reference to their race, gender, sexual orientation, or whatever. And even Descartes is guilty of this, right? He says that everyone, no matter what, should stop and doubt their existence. This is what Descartes thinks. He thinks that having that Cartesian skepticism, that intense skepticism, is a useful endeavor, is a useful thing to do for every single person in the world, regardless of their situation, regardless of their race, gender, and sexual orientation. It's good for you to stop and look at your hands and say, are my hands actually my hands? Do they actually exist? Or is nothing actually externally real besides my mind? Descartes thinks that's useful. However, Mills comes in and starts sort of questioning the usefulness and the utility of that. He says, and he's speaking particularly from a Black embodied experience, a Black man embodied experience. But I do think that a lot of what he says here can be applied to a lot of other historical and traditional minorities. He tells us this: Black people know that what is in the books is largely mythical. It's not real. As a general statement of principles that were never intended to be applicable to them, to Black people in the first place, but that one has to pretend that it does. We can go back to our unit on ethics and applied ethics. Particularly, it's easier to see with ethics. Charles Mills is here arguing that when it comes to philosophy and it comes to ethics, and we get all these beautiful theories, such as utilitarianism and deontology, we ignore the fact that, historically speaking, all of these philosophers and all of the people that followed and believed in these philosophers and their beautiful philosophies violated those philosophies when it came to Black people. But not just when it comes to ethics. Also, interestingly, he says, when it comes to epistemology, this thing that Descartes is talking about pretending, or not pretending, about doubting our external reality, doubting everything and how that's useful. He's saying here, we have to pretend that is useful to Black people. But it's not. Not really. He continues saying, the impatience or indifference that I have sometimes detected in Black students seems to derive in part from their sense that there is something strange in spending a whole course describing the logic or different moral ideals, for example, without ever mentioning that all of them were systematically violated for Blacks. I just mentioned this. It's easier to see this in regards to ethics, but he's also talking about this in regards to epistemology and in regards to Descartes. So at this point, a little bit of terminology is important. Ontology is a fancy philosophical word, which means the study of existence itself at its most basic and most foundational. In a very real sense, Descartes is involved with ontology, what actually exists, because he doubts so much, right? Mills is also going to be engaged in an ontology here, but he's particularly going to be engaged with a social ontology, or namely existence within society, what fundamentally exists within society, within a group of people, within a community. Sum, it's a fancy way of saying yourself. And here at this point, Charles Mills makes a distinction between a Cartesian sum as well as an Ellisonian sum. So let's talk about the Cartesian sum first. He tells us this: the Cartesian problem, according to him, represented as an allegedly universal predicament, something that everyone should go through. and everyone has trouble with at one point in their life. And the foundational solution of knowledge of one's existence thus becomes emblematic, a kind of pivotal scene for a whole way of doing philosophy, and one that involves a whole program of assumptions about the world and taking for granted normative claims about what is philosophically important. Key features about the Cartesian sum, again, which pretends to be universal. This is something that everyone does experience and should experience, is that it is a process of doubting everything and everyone, that everyone should go through this at one point in their life, and everyone does go through this at one point of life. Again, that's universal, applies to everyone as individuals. Furthermore, according to the Cartesian sum, you are a mind. The body is just not important to who you are. And the conclusion is that you as an individual exist. You are real, and no one can take this away from you. Again, you are a thinking thing. So long as you are thinking, no one can take this away from you. This is a largely metaphysical or traditionally metaphysical in philosophy. But we're going to go ahead and compare this with the Ellisonian sum. So the Ellisonian sum, and you don't have to read this yourself, he's getting that terminology by a Black author, a famous Black author called Ralph Ellison, in his famous book Invisible Man. And this book by Ralph Ellison, Invisible Man, it's a novel that follows the life and the memoirs, basically, of a Black man, and how this Black man is essentially invisible. People do not see him. People do not see him as important. People do not see him as vital to society. People do not see him as valuable. People sort of just look right past him. A modern day contemporary example that doesn't deal with race but deals with class is homeless people. Have you ever noticed, maybe you've done this yourself, when there's a homeless person down the street, people don't look at them. They sort of look away. They become invisible. In Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison talks about that experience, about how you, or the main character, but the protagonist, as a Black man, in a very real sense, doesn't exist in society, not in any meaningful way. He continues saying, what are the problems that this individual, the Ellisonian sum, the Black individual, the Black man in particular, but also Black women and other minorities, faces? Is the problem global doubt? Not at all. The Black man, the Black individual, is not doubting external reality. He says such a doubt would never be possible, because the whole point of subordinate Black experience, or the general experience of suppressed groups, is that the subordinate people are in no position to doubt the existence of the world and other people, especially that of their oppressors. Those whose attachment is more dangerous, more precarious, whose existence is dependent on the goodwill or ill temper of others, are those compelled to recognize that it exists. In other words, the oppressed, particularly Charles Mills and Ralph Ellison, are talking about Black men. If a Black man goes up to a white man or an oppressor or whoever, and let's make it more extreme, right? Let's pretend that an enslaved Black man before the Civil War goes up to their white male enslaver, their master, and they start telling them, master, I'm not really sure that you exist. I think you're not really real. I think only that my mind exists. How do you think it's going to go for that enslaved person? It's not going to go very well. In fact, it's not useful, as Descartes has mentioned, to doubt external existence if you're in that precarious, oppressed situation. Because if you start doubting them, they're going to look at you, and either they're going to call you crazy, they're not going to care and continue oppressing you, or they're going to get mad, and they're going to punish you for doubting their existence and make sure that you know they actually exist, according to Charles Mills and Ralph Ellison. He continues, if your daily existence is largely defined by your oppression, by forced intercourse with the world, You don't have the experience to doubt it. It's not going to occur to you that doubt about your oppressor's existence could in any way be a serious or pressing philosophical problem. This idea will simply seem kind of dumb and kind of privileged. So the key features of the Ellisonian sums, it's not about how do I know that anything else in the world exists. It's more about how do I know that I myself exist in a socially meaningful way? How do I know that I myself am real in society? So it's not individualistic. Individual Black people do not exist in society because Black people as a group do not exist. So it is not about individual selves doubting their existence. It's a collective thing. Because you belong to a collective, you don't exist. Not socially, not meaningfully. And interesting enough, it's because of the body you have that you don't exist in a socially meaningful way. This body determines your non-existence. Notice that we're still being sort of metaphysical and we're still talking about existing, but again, we're talking about a social existence here, a social ontology here. But okay, at this point, I've given you folks a lot. I'm going to go ahead and pause here, and we're going to go ahead and finish these slides next time. But as a general takeaway, it's very much criticizing Descartes and his idea that the Cartesian sum, doubting all external existence, is useful, and that's something that people do and should go through. But with that said, I'll see you folks next time.